Welcome to Pepper the Pastor. This is a ministry of Faith Family Church where we get to ask questions of our beloved pastor. I'm Patrick LaVore, member of Faith Family Church, here with my friend and pastor, Wes Feltner.
Good to be with you.
Good to be with you. Wes, you have been speaking of late about the importance of being together, and it does bring up a question because it's spoken about in Hebrews chapter 10 about the importance of being together, not neglecting the meeting. So I'm going to read a little bit from that.
Sure.
We'll start in verse 23 of Hebrews chapter 10. Let us hold fast the confession of our hope without wavering, for he who promised is faithful. And let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works, not neglecting to meet together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near. So the question is, are there other biblical references that speak to the importance of meeting together, especially in a day and age where technology allows us not to meet together?
Again, great question. These are things that are on the minds of so many people as they're thinking about church life and, again, wanting to follow faithfully what the Scripture teaches. I think a lot of times what we want is we kind of want the black and white commandment that's just obvious, like thou shalt go to church every week or something like that. But the Bible doesn't always give us that kind. Now, in this particular example that you gave, the writer is writing to Hebrew Christians that are being persecuted, and it's going to be very easy for them to go elsewhere and to, in fact, go back to Judaism is ultimately what they're being attempted to do. And the writer knows that if they're not together, if they're not meeting together, it's going to be very easy to slip back into that. So they're coming together physically and being with one another, stirring each other up to love and good works was a necessity for them to persevere and to continue on in the faith. Now, outside of that example, there's not a lot of other clear black and white don't forsake assembling together. But what you do have are things like all the one another's. Love one another, forgive one another. Well, obviously the question is going to be, how are you going to do that if you're never with one another, right? So the commands of the one another's by themselves imply that you are coming together often. The practice of the early church in Acts chapter 2, they were frequently gathering together daily even. So that practice of in-person gathering was taking place. And then you think about how many letters in the New Testament are written to local churches. The church in Corinth, the church at Rome. And so clearly, even by the very letters themselves, they are going to specific geographic places where people are together. So putting all that together, yes, the clear emphasis and teaching of the New Testament is being together. Now, last thing I'll say is, I do think, for instance, in the tradition that I grew up in, we can be too rigid about what that has to look like. So like it has to be church on Sunday, or it has to be this or that. The New Testament actually doesn't give that pattern. It tells you what they did in the early church, but it doesn't prescribe specifically how it must be done. So I do think community and being in community with other believers is the heart of this issue in the New Testament, more than institutionalism and rigid like church attendance, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. Just kind of a little follow-up, if I may. There are many who would say that, well, I don't need church. I don't need to go to a church. I worship God in the forest or wherever it may be, or I listen to music in my car. Can you speak to that again? Just what's your view on that?
Yeah, and this is a whole nother great Pepper the Pastor question because now
a lot of pepper in it.
Because then you'd have to ask
heavy on the pepper.
Absolutely, bring the pepper on. You have to ask, what is a church? I mean, of course, we know the church is God's called out people. It's not a building. We realize that. But are three Christian buddies out fishing on Sunday afternoon the church? And so while we want to give room to say it doesn't have to look in the institutional way, there are things the New Testament teaches, like a church has pastors. a church participates in the ordinances. There are things that must be there for it to be a church, that just, again, three buddies who happen to be believers out in the fishing boat, the New Testament's not going to let you say, well, that's my church. There's more to church life than that in the New Testament.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
So, if you would please like this channel, subscribe to this channel, and attend Faith Family Church. Go to the website, faithfamilymn.org, and don't go to the Church of the Holy Rowboat. Go to Faith Family Church. Thank you.